Good morning from New York. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Fabrizio Andreuzzi from the United Nations Development Program. And it's a pleasure, it's a privilege to represent my organization at the Paris Peace Forum. This year we are featuring 3 initiatives, and one of them is the one I lead about digital assessment toolkits and digital solutions for rapid and data-driven policy making. I work in the UNDP Crisis Bureau. I lead on the crisis systems and tools for the organization. And this is one of the tools we have developed in the past few years. Today, I'm going to talk about this journey, and we'll talk a little bit about also the future of this type of toolkit, and hopefully this can trigger some interest for further joint collaboration on similar initiative. Next slide, please. So in this very brief presentation, I think we can start with something that, especially in crisis situation, challenges all of us. Is the information gap, is the issue of data quality, reliability, time constraint for decision making, level of ownership of national actors of information for crisis response and recovery. And very often we lack a solid baseline against which we can measure we can track recovery, reconstruction in the aftermath of major crises. Next slide. That's why at UNDP we came up with a solution that we started working on integrated digital assessment solutions. Certainly, I mean, it is an innovation in the sense that allowed us to move from very slow paper-based, relatively cumbersome exercises into much more efficient in terms of time and often even in terms of cost primary data collection in the aftermath of crisis, but also allowed us to initiate dialogue in terms of digital transformation with our counterparts. Next slide. So what are these innovative solutions we're talking about when it comes to digital data collection? First of all, these tools are end-to-end digital. They allow rapid data collection through mobile phone and tablet, but also online with different media. They allow to do almost real-time analysis and visualization through ad hoc dashboards. And more importantly, they are extremely adaptable and flexible, both in terms of context-specific data information and in terms of solutions, particularly when it comes to technology to carry out needs assessment and data analysis and visualization. And ultimately, they are extremely important also to trigger more evidence-based, data-driven decision-making in the aftermath of crisis and for decisions about reconstruction and recovery. Next slide. With regard to our tools, I think our focus is on primary data collection at household level, as well as micro and small and medium enterprises. We have also focused on building damage assessment, and overall, I think the opportunity to track socio-economic indicators in terms of impact of crisis on affected population and these groups. Next slide. Next slide. For us, I mean, who benefits? We saw that type of data that we are collecting. For us, it's important to target specific groups that are often, let's say, data poor. There's not enough information, especially in the immediate aftermath of crisis. So we're looking into indigenous group, for example, informal sector, informal vendors. We're looking at specific vulnerable groups that may be left out. So this type of initiative, this type of tools allow also to do better and leave no one behind approach in reaching out to vulnerable groups. If we can go to the previous slide again, please. Now, in terms of how we came about these tools, there's a bit of a journey. We started actually with a building damage assessment that was pioneered in the Caribbean in 2017 in assessing the damage of Category 5 Hurricane Maria on the island of Dominica. So that was the very first time that we embarked in a digital assessment to basically assess damage to buildings. And that was the very first seminal experience that allowed us to understand really the reach and the opportunity of even further developing this type of tool. And in 2018, we added also household information to the building damage assessment component, and we started really developing a more comprehensive tool in collaboration with impact initiatives. And in 2019, we managed actually to roll it out in the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian, and in Albania after the earthquake that struck the major one that struck the country almost 1 year ago. In 2020, again, with impact initiatives, we actually started the work on the socio-economic impact assessment. And as often happens, the crisis gave us another opportunity, as the hurricane did in 2017. The COVID-19 crisis actually gave us an opportunity to create a tool for socio-economic impact assessment at the household and micro, small, medium enterprises level on the impact of COVID-19. And almost in a record time, we managed to develop this toolkit and roll it out at a UNDP level. Right now, we have some experience, and we'll talk a little bit about the socioeconomic impact assessment experience in the past few months, and we're definitely looking forward in improving both the household and building damage assessment tool as well as the socioeconomic impact assessment tool. Next slide. And next, please. So a little bit the story about the Seia, the socioeconomic impact assessment of the COVID. Really, as we know, we are all affected, we are all impacted. I'm working from home. Many of us are doing this, and many of us are again in lockdowns, unfortunately. But indeed, this was a very rapid rising tide type of situation. Really, a lot of countries affected, a steep demand of information, also to collect primary data, target some vulnerable groups. So for us, was really a race against time, and together with impact initiatives, we really pulled this off in a few weeks. And you can see the data on the screen, hopefully very clearly, that we managed to do this in a very, very swift fashion, which again, it's one of the benefits of this type of tools that can be developed and rolled out in quite a fast track. In our case, we did quite a comprehensive training. We covered over 70 countries in 2 weeks through the digital trainings. So we were able to roll out the Seia tool in a matter of few weeks globally in the organization. So again, the crisis gave us an opportunity. The type of constraints we faced, without sending teams on the ground, we managed to do this online. We managed to reach out to over 70 countries. We also created a community in UNDP of over 400 colleagues that were trained and were able to interact on a day-to-day on the rollout of the Seia. We also introduced, at least for our organization, an innovative model, which was the remote support unit, because once we rolled out the socioeconomic impact assessment, we wanted to have experts to work hand in hand with our country offices. So we have created a remote support unit that was a mix of digital volunteers, consultants, and our internal staff that worked, again, as I mentioned, with our country offices, with our regional offices to roll out socioeconomic impact assessment at country level. Also tailoring to the tools, as I said, they are very flexible tools, tailoring to the needs on the ground in terms of target group, geographic coverage, partners on the ground, national and international, and so on. So for us was also an interesting experiment that has proved to be successful. Next slide. And in terms of results, you can see on the map the coverage we had so far. And it's interesting that in several of these countries, the socioeconomic impact assessment triggered more surveys going forward. So basically, our national counterparts, very often the governments, were not only interested in this type of solutions, but they start adopting them, and therefore use them for further surveys. Let's say even beyond the COVID impact. And as we know, COVID is not going away. There's always a second or third wave depending on the context. So a lot of these exercises can be repeated, can be adjusted and tailored. So on this end also has been quite an interesting story and an interesting success. And as I mentioned, a lot of these countries have adopted themselves the tool through UNDP with the other partners on the ground, governmental and non-governmental. And so there is quite a diversity out there. You see one color there, but there is quite a diversity in terms of application of the Seia in various countries. Next slide. Very briefly on the evolution of the initiative, and of course, as you can see, the journey we have embarked since 2017 to today has been marked with quite a lot of changes, quite a lot of improvements and evolution. So for us, indeed, this is not something static; it's something very dynamic that, of course, follows, unfortunately, crisis events, but at the same time follows also innovation, new opportunities. And I'm not only talking about technology, I'm also talking about partnerships. I'm talking about solutions developed by private sector, by governmental, non-governmental agencies, and of course our UN sister agencies. I'll get there towards the end of the presentation with a little bit more details. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Maybe just one more interesting evolution, since we were talking about that, is what happened. Unfortunately, another tragic event in August in Beirut. This major explosion that created not only a huge amount of destruction, but really a national trauma in Lebanon. And so again, we managed to work very closely with our country office in Beirut, counterparts on the ground, to kick off household and building damage assessment on the ground with the collaboration. You can see in the picture of very vibrant young civil engineers. And also we managed to go fully online with a socioeconomic impact assessment of the blast using social media information and really reaching out over 9,000 questionnaires in a matter of few days. And so this was actually a major experiment, let's call it this way, a major solution that we have identified on the go, thanks to a lot of the experience we had accumulated in the first months of the year with the Seias, and also through the Seias at country level collaboration with teams in UNDP that were not just in the remote support unit, but we were working together with them. So it's something that we see in UNDP as a growing practice with a lot of interesting solutions and ideas that are very much grassroots, that really coming up from the bottom. They're coming from the countries, and perhaps that's the best way to make them work. Next slide. So going back and somehow going towards the conclusion of my brief presentation, really we're eager to continue working on these tools, identify new solutions. For example, on artificial intelligence, we had already some interesting applications with partners. We were partnering with the Qatar Computing Research Institute to really get their technical leadership to identify artificial intelligence solutions on data available in the aftermath of disasters. We're looking also in increasing UNDP contribution to humanitarian development and peace nexus, both internally in the organization as well as externally. We are collaborating with Impact Initiative. We have a memorandum of understanding with them. We are exploring a collaboration with the Global Shelter Cluster, so with additional humanitarian agencies, as well as with the World Food Program on solutions on artificial intelligence and use of satellite data. We already have a partnership with the UNOSAT, also on satellite imagery analysis. So really, I would be interested in having also a conversation both in the Q&A session and of course in the digital booth about potential interest to collaborate on these initiatives with UNDP. And let me also conclude before opening for Q&A that for us is really an opportunity to become more efficient, more effective in the way we collect data for evidence decision making in the organization for our counterparts using, next slide please, rapid and transformative and reliable tools. And we hope really to have a little contribution also in the way digital transformation is happening in the world, despite a lot of crises, despite a lot of challenges. So thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to discussing virtually with you in this Q&A. Thank you. Maybe while I'm looking now at the chat, I can also kindly ask anyone who's interested in making a question to briefly write a line about her or his role in the organization, so that we can address it also perhaps after the Q&A. So I can see already one question. How does the evaluation work? Who conducts the survey? Is it only used by UNDP offices or will it also be used by other agencies? So, but certainly, I mean, we use it as UNDP, but we offer it. We offer this to the government and we offer it to other agencies. Again, depends on the scope of the assessment, what type of scope, target group, which agencies are involved on the ground, which agencies are present. But normally the minimum is UNDP and the governmental counterpart, but very often other UN agencies can be involved, as well as, of course, non-governmental organizations, national and international. In terms of how does it work, as I mentioned, is end-to-end digital. So we have the data collection tool, a digital data collection tool. We use an open source digital data collection tool that is Kobo Toolbox, that is widely used in the humanitarian community. It's quite reliable. It's very solid. The data is also very safe. It's hosted by OCHA in the CERN in Geneva. So that's the digital data collection platform we use, Kobo Toolbox. We also visualize. We have various options for data visualization. Those are mainly commercial options, but widely available. For example, Microsoft Power BI, Tableau. And who conducts the survey in terms of on the ground? We have again arrangements of teams that can be organized with the government, with the national counterparts, and of course with UNDP offices. Well, there's another question about how many people do you need to interview to ensure that the survey is representative of the problems of a society? How do you choose the people to interview? Well, again, this is all the preliminary work that needs to be done on the ground with our counterparts in terms of scope and objectives, sampling frame, and really technically define target groups, target regions, and based on that we will identify the the number of people to be interviewed. Has the tool evolved since its creation? What has been improved or could still be improved? Okay, well, for example, a lot of improvement happened from, as I mentioned, from the building damage assessment we did in 2017 to what we did, for example, in Beirut in August 2020. A lot of the improvement comes with practice, comes with interaction of partners. For example, we have increased a lot the reliability and the accuracy on the data collection. For example, GPS reading. I forgot to mention that all the data we collect is georeferenced. So we really addressed issues of data accuracy when it comes to georeferenced information, so that we know that buildings or information for households is accurate and can be tracked over time. So we address quite a lot the technological aspect, and I think we can do better, for example, also on improving the tools, not only in terms of its contextualization at country level, but also in terms of cross-fertilization with other partners, other actors that are involved, that have very similar objectives and perhaps similar tools. The good news is that we are using an open source tool, so it lends itself for data collection, so it lends to itself to this kind of improvements, and of course is widely used, as I mentioned, by other organizations. What can still be improved? I think the end of the presentation, I think new technology for the analysis of data, before even going in the field, as much as possible, try to already have a very good picture of, for example, damage on buildings or information that can be crowdsourced from the population without necessarily going out directly. That can happen at maybe a later stage, but we can try to have as much as possible information early on. That's vital, obviously, for humanitarian response, but it's also very, very relevant for recovery assessments and to really establish the solid baseline that can be consolidated and tracked later. There's another question here. Why is there a need to develop digital solution for conducting assessments? Well, because in the past it took weeks and months to get the information out, especially when you were going for primary data collection. I myself did field assessments with paper-based solutions, and it took weeks to get the information out in a not even in a report, in a presentation with some tables, etc. So that sometimes is something that we cannot afford anymore. And I think the technology solutions are there to be exploited for a greater good. I see I have 5 minutes left, so we can still take a few last questions. Why is this tool mainly used in the countries of the Global South and not in the countries of Western Europe or North America? Well, that's a very good question. As United Nations, our presence is in many countries, but in terms of presence in Western and North America is mainly headquarters and representation, number one. Number two, we assume there is enough capacity from national institutions to lead on these exercises. And sometimes actually we can benefit also from their experience to advance our tool. So our primary focus is on those countries in the South. Having said that, don't get me wrong, a lot of excellent solutions, low cost, innovative, totally digital, they're coming from the South these days. And so indeed, maybe as a bit of a provocation, the South should probably give some assistance even to the North for the management of certain crises and the innovation of certain tools. I don't see any more question in the chat. Sorry, because I cannot hear anything in my headset, so I can only read questions. I don't know if there are other questions, but meanwhile, we have a digital booth. So we have colleagues from my team that perhaps are even better placed to answer technical questions and address more in-depth queries that you may have. So I invite you to visit our booth, a digital booth. I'm so sorry we cannot be in presence in Paris. We definitely missed out. this year. But in addition to that, we also have, in addition to the digital booth, where you can find also information that you can download, we also have a website that you can visit for further information. We have an email address where you can write email to follow up. So we're really looking forward to widening our network of contacts for further follow-up and for further evolution of these tools. So I think if there is no more questions, I think we can close, because I know this abruptly ends, and so it's not very nice to be shut down by the computer. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your interest and participation. And we look forward to hearing from you next. Have a nice day, nice evening, wherever you are. Bye.